Talking to you from Florida. We call it the Sunshine State because we don't have winter here, or actually our winter is everybody else's spring. I'm so glad to see all of you from all over the Arab world, especially from Palestine and from Gaza. It just gives me the goosebump, and I will try my best to give you everything that I could help you with to be able to take this information and really apply it in your clinical setting. As I understand, most of the people here are occupational therapists, right?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So I'll just want to make sure so I can tailor the talk where it's suitable for occupational therapists. So I chose the topic, the freeze response, because it's one of the states that you can face it in any profession. If you are a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're an occupational therapist, teacher, police officer, and sometimes these things can slide and not be able to either see it or understand, what's happening and how you can handle it, especially for occupational therapists. I see here someone is asking if there are slides. Actually, there's no slides. It's just I'm gonna explain the term and just interact with you to see if you have any questions. So Hans Selye in 1930, he coined the term stress, and he introduced it to us in the term that under extreme stress, we react either with fight or flight. And several decades later, trauma therapists actually and researcher introduced the notion of a third defense under extreme stress, which is freeze, the freeze response. Later on now, we have so many other defense responses that we're not going to cover now, but I will cover the freeze response and how to handle that with your patient when you're working or with your client, because it's extremely critical, not just for psychotherapists, for many other professions. So just imagine that you are delivering, for example, a diagnosis, or you're telling your client some kind of diagnosis that is not pleasant for them to hear. Think about those times when your patient didn't have any questions. Have you ever talked to your client and you are talking and talking and you kind of told them what's wrong with them and they didn't have any question? Have you seen that in your clip? Yes, of course, it happens. The patient, when you deliver bad news for them, they are so overloaded. There's so much to the point that there's no reaction. That can be a part where your patient is going on a freeze mode. That freeze mode had been confusing for so many people, how to define that freeze mode, because actually there is two kinds of freeze. The freeze that we all know, which is when you basically just freeze. Everybody know that term. But let's get exactly what I mean when we're talking about that freeze response. Because there's a lot of confusion about it. The first that let's think about when you are faced with a predator, or you're faced with a noise of a siren, or you hear like you're driving and you hear the brake squeal. So what's the first thing you react? You just take that moment, just freeze. And then you kind of immediately start thinking, where am I right now to the noise? And yes, correct, freeze. And where am I to the noise? Am I close? Am I in the right path? Is that noise or that predator is coming toward me? So once you orient yourself, then you make the right decision, whether you keep driving or move to the side, or you look, you're in the jungle, you see like the trees are moving and you're looking like, you freeze. Okay, it's safe. And then you go from that freeze and you take action. So this is one kind of freeze. It's called the orienting freeze. You're orienting yourself, but that's not the kind that we're going to be talking about at this moment for this session. The kind of freeze that we will be working with is now the second one. the one that I'm gonna coin now, not the orienting freeze that we go through every day in our lives. Imagine that predator or that noise. Let's talk about predator more. Move closer. So you're not just looking at a predator and you kind of assess the situation, assess where you are, and you moved on. No, the predator now is moving closer. When you have that, so your body immediately go into two modes, either fight or flight. So your body kind of either run away, okay, that's dangerous, let me run, or you can sit and fight. And we've seen that in the news, like where some people, when they are attacked, they will immediately fight, or you just run. These reactions are taken over by our nervous system. And by the way, it's not voluntary, it's involuntary. Okay, so far we're good, we're safe. We're able to run, or we're able to sit and fight. What if you are faced with a horrific thing, or a predator, or like we're seeing our children in Gaza, the building just, collapse, and there's nowhere to fight or flight, and there's nowhere to go out. And that feeling of the tension and you wanting to escape, but you can't move and you cannot escape. This is when you reach that freeze where you cannot escape, because we call it, you become immobile. And when you become immobile, that's very, very critical when you see someone in your office that is not moving. And it's not just having that they're not moving physically. Sometimes if you watch closer, their gaze is fixated. Like, they're sitting, but they're fixated, their gaze. You can see that they're fixated, over something. Or you can be frozen emotionally. A lot of time, emotionally, when you become frozen is when you can't do anything. Those days when you have a lot to do, you don't do anything. And when you have a lot of work to accomplish, you have to go to work, you have a lot of report to write, you have a lot of patient to do, you have so much, and some reason you just not there. You can't do anything. That's an emotional freeze as well. Now that we talked about those two kind of freeze, let's talk about what really is happening on the level of your nervous system. And the reason I want to explain that, and I want to explain it in very simple words, not using any scientific term, not using any jargons, because you want to say that for your client. One of the ways to approach the freeze response to your patient, to be able to work with them, because sometimes you'll be working with them, but you're moving them, but really they're not cooperating with you. It's important to explain to your patient what's happening in your nervous system in a simple language that they can comprehend and understand. And I use that with most, even my patient. When we talk about emotion, I kind of explain to them how is emotion in the body. So let's quickly talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is what's responsible of the fight, flight, and freeze. But of course, you want to introduce it to your patient as you say, autonomic, auto, car. So we can start giving metaphors for your patient. You tell them, like, imagine you are in a car, and that's your nervous system that is called autonomic nervous system. And think about that car has two branches. That nervous system does have two branches. One branch is called the sympathetic nervous system, which is the one that is actually execute fight or flight, basically action. And you want to make that and tell your patient that it's like we're in a car, that's the gas pedal. See the gas, what does the gas do? It just makes you move. So that sympathetic nervous system, that branch from the autonomic nervous system, is responsible for you when you run, or when you fight, or when you take any action. Now, the other branch is parasympathetic nerves. So the parasympathetic nervous system is basically what your body does when you're resting. So there's no action, but there's something going on. For example, you're resting, your digestion, you're relaxing. Actually, you're making a social connection, love, all of that. It's happening, but there's no action like the sympathetic. That's the parasympathetic. So you kind of give them example. This is like the brake in the car. So you have the gas pedal and you have the brake. So the gas make you move, the brake kind of things are there, but you're not moving. Now that parasympathetic nervous system also goes into two other branches. The one branch, of it, that what we talked about, what I just talked about, is love, connection, social connection, actually even higher cognition, like when you're thinking and when you're doing things, but they're silent. However, when you are stuck in that freeze, there is a nervous system that is connected to that parasympathetic nervous system that is very, very primitive, very primitive. And this is when your patient freeze. So it's taking care of that part of the nervous system. The reason I am simplifying the language, because later on in the session, part of you helping your patient is explaining to them what's happening. And if you will explain to them what's happening, and you will lose them, especially when you talk in a way that has a lot of scientific term. And as I said now, that freeze response is where the nervous system that is connected to connection with people. And later on, we'll talk about the importance of that and how is that part of therapy. It's important to understand that, because many times we are in that state, in freeze, other than that rigidity in the muscles, you kind of assume yourself that you lack motivation. You go and watch some motivational movies, or you kind of go read a book that you want to push you to work. And that's not, when you are in that state, is what's needed. What you need when you are in that state is to connect with another person, meaning call a friend, call your mom, call your dad, your sister, your best friend, your cousin, your uncle, whoever you want to talk to get you out. And basically that diagnosis normally very much mistaken with depression and sadness. And a lot of therapists can assume that lack of motivation, they're not working, don't want to do anything, is because they're sad or depressed. But further, if you talk more to the patient, you can understand that this is one of the freeze response that need human connection. We're going to go back now to where we want to concentrate our freeze on the tonic immobility. The tonic immobility is really the first phase. When we get there, if you can't fight, you can't flight, the sympathetic nervous system, your body would go to the parasympathetic, you will freeze. And when you get that, it's like, it's so far, it's reversal. You can move from that freeze, you can move to moving or running. Because according to Dr., and I want to give that credit for her, that's Ruth Linnaeus, shifting from the nervous system is what often prepare us to when we confront with inescapable stress. So we shift from orienting ourselves to running, or to fighting, or even freezing. That's protecting factor. It's very protective for people who have no way to escape the danger. So if you think about that freeze response where you are literally immobile, that nervous system is protecting your body, because imagine if you're able to see what's happening around you, what could happen to you. So one of the great God blessing to us is that freeze response. It kind of shuts you down. It shuts any information to go in or to go out. It just you can't move. Well, remember, you're breathing, because actually the muscles, when you freeze, the two that are working in tonic immobility is your posture. You can sit still, you can lay down, you can be sitting, and the muscles for your breathing. So both are working. The part in your brain that is not working is the left brain, that does not comprehend language and does not see or feel around you in the world what's happening. So can you feel how protective that is, especially for those children that we're seeing in the news every day? And I'm going to play a video a little bit further after I explain that one part to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let's say you can't even escape and your nervous system need to adapt further than freeze. Then the next step comes emotional shutdown and collapse. And we've seen that where people will just faint. In this case, this is not a session where we'll talk about emotional shutdown and collapse, but this is hopefully for another session. And this is when you have that, you have to call 911, you have to call ambulance to help your patient. But we'll stick now to the rigidity kind of freeze. I think someone had their hands raised. I will take questions once I finish like each part, and I'll take questions. So think about how adaptive this response to your patient, not feeling all of the horror that's going on around them and what they're seeing. One thing as well that is extremely important to pay attention to when people get to that freeze response and they start coming out of it, especially adult parents that we've seen, there is a sense of shame and self-blame that accompany that freeze response. Now, imagine you wake up and you couldn't do anything, and you find your children dead, and you find your whole family under the rubble. You find all of that, and you cannot do anything. There is a sense of self-blame and shame that you need to be aware of when you work with a patient or a client that passed through this trauma. And it's extremely important to address that and not take it lightly, because that could be an obstacle with you working with your patient. So it's really important to use the psychoeducation. I did speak about the nervous system, about the brakes and the gas, and how is that, how can you explain that to your patient? And it's extremely important. And now you need to tell your patient a little bit about their feeling of shame. And you need to speak in the same language that we spoke previously about the nervous system for your patient to ease the part where they beat themselves up. So just talking about the shame in terms of what happened physiologically, and that's the next psychological education before you start working with the patient, already is de-shaming, because we're talking about it in a way of a mammalian response, tadiyat, and because we're talking about it in this way, it becomes, the patient kind of look at that shame they're feeling, that it's more of a physiological response, and you kind of take them out of the notion that it was my fault or a moral failing from their part, that they couldn't do anything when other family member needed them. So you need to tell your patient the following. You can use your own language. I'm just going to tell you what I would say, and then you can use your own terms to explain that to your patient, that sense of shame. Where is it coming from? So the typical response for any threat, what is it? We already talked about it. You either become aggressive and you fight it, or you run away, or you shut down, you freeze. And I don't know if you've seen that term we say, it's like the deer in the headlight response. There's many here in the United States, when you're driving a car and in the night and you have your headlights, and you'll find a deer literally jumped, just standing and staring at you. And like, for God's sake, move, I'll hit you, just move. That deer is in that freeze response. And that's why that look of that deer with the light and they're staring is scared. The deer does not know that this is a car. They just saw light. And this is where the term came from. When you look like this, we call it that the deer in the headlight response. See, you explain to your patient that every organism, if you feel threatened, you have to defend yourself. If you feel threatened of any danger, so you shut down or you act out in rage. So this part of, when you build a general sense of this is a common humanly reaction, it's found so particularly useful even to tell them it's a reflex. This is a reflex that you have no control of. When you go to the doctor and they use this patella reflex, the doctor office, where they hit, that area under your kneecap and your foot comes up. When we do it with, we kind of laugh, right? And actually, when you have your children doing that, it's funny. You don't feel a sense of guilt or shame. You're not shamed when the doctor does that because it's a reflex. It's something reflects from your muscle that it has to be done, that you have no control of. Therefore, when you explain that as your reaction and freeze is a reflex to your patient, you kind of change the narrative of shaming oneself to look at it as, is it protecting yourself that you have no control of it? Because that response, when it comes from trauma like this, it will repeat in that patient's life. It can repeat every time they come to your session. So I very much advise you to give that psychological education about the feeling of shame. How is it just like a muscle reflex? You have no control of it. Therefore, you can change the mindset of your patient to not blame themselves or feel that they did something immoral or shame themselves. Why do we need to do that? This all help you in working with your client. It just all help them to understand what's happening inside their body, and it help them to understand, to be merciful on themselves, not to keep beating themselves up. Now, before we move about, the therapeutical, some techniques, any questions, or what is your reflection or your thoughts about the two introduction, the psychological education about the nervous system and the feeling of shame that you can tell your patient? And if you can think of any patient that you really think that you can use this technique with them before start working with them, what is your reflection? Can somebody share? Or what do you feel about using this technique in your session?
I see Nahid raising her hand.
Okay.
I'll try to make.
For some reason, I can't see the questions. I see somebody raising their hand, but your experiences are important to share with me. And if you have any questions about what I said.
No, I cannot see your hand rising.
Okay, that's fine. I kind of now I open. I kind of see now the chat finally. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so no questions so far. So
I think it's clear.
Okay, wonderful.
اوكي دكتور عريب، هو مش سؤال بس انا حبيت اقول لك احنا بالدراسه تبعتنا بناخذ عن التشايلد ديفلوبمنت وبنعرف عن الريفلكسز، يعني this is part of the occupational therapy education، هذا في الباك جراوند. وفي شغله حبيت احكيها، انه احنا لما بندرس عن السنسوري انتجريشن موضوع الشت داون برضه it is part of، يعني مثلا مرات بتلاقي في ولد هايبر عنده حساسية زائدة مثلا هايبر سنسيتيف، بس بلحظة بيكون قاعد بالزاوية وكأنه فعلا شت داون، بيعمل جهازه العصبي بيعمل shut down. فأنا وأنت بتحكي تذكرت هذا الديسكريبشن لما إحنا درسنا عن السنسوري انتجريشن، يعني إنه
So what do you think when can you describe to me when you say shut down, because I want to
shut
make
down
sure it's not
يعني
in the
okay
face.
Usually children who are having hypersensitive sensory systems, they usually, you will see them like moving, crushing with the stuff, and you know they are really like hyperactive, okay? And at a moment you will see them just quiet, like they are not hearing you, like they are not listening to you, like they are not there. So they say that their sensory system is shutting down. It has shut down. It is like a defense mechanism, as you said.
Absolutely.
But we learned this in sensory integration, actually.
Absolutely. What I will explain now, I'll give you some techniques, and I would like after that to tell me if this is something you previously used and how to navigate them not listening to you. Of course, you know, the big part of the parasympathetic system, when they shut down, that has the freeze and you can't communicate anymore, is because your left brain, where it actually processes language, is the one that's closed. But there are other windows that you can sneak in to that patient and talk to. And I'm talking about this, but excellent question. And you kind of jumped ahead, but we will talk about it now. So let's assume that the description, Aisha, that you described for that patient is a tonic immobility response, okay? The patient is frozen, not listening to you, not there, they're gone, okay? So my goal here, your first goal should be for this individual is moving. So we don't care about really to ask them what's happened, you know, what's going on? Talk to me. Are you okay? All of that is going to come later. But your first goal when you see a patient in that freeze response is to have that individual move. And when I say move, I'm not saying go walk and talk, even if it's the slightest move. And this is what I'm going to explain now. So sometimes probably the whole body is frozen. Sometimes part of the body is frozen. Some muscles are like this, or, you know, they're like this, or their legs, you know, they kind of crumble their legs up, you know. And sometimes if you pay or you come close to them, you will see their breath is very shallow. You know, it's not like the regular, you look at their chest, it could be shallow. And sometimes I'm giving you all the freeze response. Their gaze, I spoke to that at the beginning of the session, the gaze is fixated somewhere. Fixated. You're talking, they're not looking at you, they're fixated over somewhere. So finding ways, first goal, to have the patient move can be very, very crucial. According to Dr. Stephen Borges, which actually align, Aisha, with what you talked about, the sensory motor, he talks about the polyvagal theory of trauma therapy. According to him, the key successful treatment for patient nervous system, okay, their nervous system, because now you're not talking about something cognitive, you are now dealing with a problem that have to deal with their nervous system. The key success is to feel that nervous system, that child, to feel the presence of another predictable, regulated nervous system, which is you. You are the person who's coming. So before you go to that patient or that client or that child, make sure you're calm, because there's so much power of your nervous system effect on this child. And actually there's so much power or their shut down nervous system to affect you. I'll give you an example. Have you ever been in a room, you're working with your colleagues, and then another colleague walks in? They didn't do anything. They walk in and everybody in the room kind of flinch or freeze, or you have that gut feeling that dysregulated. Have you ever felt that before with some other people? And they didn't, and you will see like they didn't do anything really, but it just, when they walked in, I just had something inside me that I got dysregulated. So from talking to my friends and colleagues to you know, like, I don't know what happened. You could like that person, you could not like that person, but think about it. If you don't like someone, would they affect you that much? What is it underneath that? That's basically their nervous system affecting yours, and vice versa. Have you ever been stressed and, you know, choking, and then your girlfriend show up and you're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. She didn't do anything. She just came, but her nervous system is so regulated that kind of affected how you feel. The polyvagal theory for Dr. and I encourage everyone to read about Dr. Stephen Porges. It says here, yes, it happens also when there is a problem at home. You just feel it. Absolutely, absolutely. You're so right. So according to this theory, you kind of use your regulated nervous system to regulate your patient. So energy, yes, actually all our body cells is all energy. But that's how the first step. You be calm first before you approach the child. And in your head, keep one thing. You don't want to find out what happened. You just want them moving. So this way, you're kind of preparing yourself. I'm going to go help that child. So you kind of think of your two nervous systems talking to each other. And that's your therapy to unlock that patient, not a person talking to a person, nervous system talking to a nervous system. And by letting your client know what's happening. So you want as well, when you approach, you want to let them know what happened. It's going to give them sense of control, which is a very active ingredient in helping them return from freeze to connection. Because basically freeze is disconnection. So we want them a little bit moving so we can be able to connect again, so that part of the nervous system work again and not close. So how, if they are not hearing us, if they're not hearing our words, like I said, if this part is the left side of the brain is not working, it's hijacked, internet signal is off. So how can you talk to this patient? What can you do when you approach them? Now, one key important thing to sneak up on them or to send safety cues is your voice. So the patient may not hear your words, but they can hear the rhythm, they can hear the prosody, they can hear the intonation, which is really the way that your voice is helping them as an added safety cue to help them come out or come back. So for example, what I do with children in my office when they freeze like this, especially trauma. So you don't talk baby talk. The one thing, by the way, kids don't like when you speak baby with them. Talk like, hi, how are you? See that voice? You're such a great baby. You're so cute. You're so gorgeous. If you only know how you are. Do you hear my voice? Do you hear that rhythm? That intonation? I want you to use your voice, because that's the only way first to let the nervous system, not the child has nothing to do with it. It's their nervous system feel safe to start working so they can hear your words and what you want to tell them. You can stay talking like this to the child as much as possible, and you will, as a professional, find the cue when you're going to go to the next step. So use your rhythms, like we call it like a melody, not just, hi, how are you? How you doing? So go like this. You're so gorgeous. You're so cute. You see the melody? You want to make a melody out of your voice because they can hear it. They're not hearing your words. So try to approach first the child this way. The child will give you cues if they're listening. So keep talking this way until you kind of see some kind of a shift in their gaze. Maybe they're looking at you, but be careful. If they looked at you or they moved their gaze or they moved something, that doesn't mean they're out. So you really have to be very careful in the next step. And I'll take you to the next step and what you do. So make sure you are regulated before you go to the child. And the best way to regulate yourself is to know what you're doing next, is not to worry about why did he go and freeze, to worry about let me get him mobile, let me get him move a little bit. So the child, when they shut down, Aisha, you gave me an example. You said he's playing, he's hyper, and then boom, he shut down. Part of probably, because I wasn't there with your patient, I really don't know your patient, but a hypothesis that I'm going to throw that when the nervous system is overwhelmed with cues, a lot of cues, maybe a lot of kids are screaming, are playing, are talking, and there's a music here, there's a lot of picture, a lot of noise, colors. We don't know what really, but normally that's the motion of why would somebody, that nervous system can, I believe it goes when also having a child, oh yes, autism, yes, in a meltdown, yes, and that's for another talk about that. Basically, it's very much similar how to do the same thing with child with autism. So you want first to take the cues. So you don't want this, because remember, the freeze is a defense, right? So to let somebody's defenses down, you want to take the cues out. So I could move the child if you feel like you can carry the child to somewhere quiet, somewhere there's no noise, not a lot of noise, because that's first thing to take the overwhelming cues from around them and the activity and the energy, because that's very intrusive. It's just keeping them frozen or shut down. And the other thing is, especially with adults, be careful from the face-to-face, to go to the child and look them in the face, and proximity. Don't get too close, and don't do all that looking into them face-to-face, because you're not talking to someone who knows that you're his teacher, you're someone safe. That's extra overwhelming, dangerous cues for the parasympathetic nervous system. So no direct eye contact, no closeness, no proximity. Still, use your voice as much as you can before you get close. Now remember, this is not like the rule. If you know the child, if you know that you can speak to the child and hold them, you've done that previously and it worked, that's fine. But if you are with a child that you don't know for the first time, he's in your office and you want to work with, be cautious from getting close and doing eye contact at the beginning when they go into that freeze response. So you want to sneak in the cues, which is your voice. It is so important. And in a certain moment that you and only you would know what to take the next step and what to say to the child. So to start off, once I feel that my patient is listening, they did something from your tone of voice and they're now listening. Normally, what I do is I ask this question. This is next. Can you nod your head for yes and shake your head for no? Now, can someone tell me, why did I ask this question? Why that specific question of asking the child or the adolescents or even the adult, by the way, it's the same strategy. If they can nod their head yes or shake their head no. Alertness, following up with you, yes, very good. What else? What else? There's something that I mentioned, our main goal when we go to the patient. What do we want them to do? Alertness is excellent, because if they're not alert, if they did not respond, they're not alert. Excellent. We want to see first if they're following up. To follow command, response, yes, that's part of alertness, yes. To communicate, yes. Moving, yes. Rawan, who's this? Moving, yes. And Esma, yes. See, I get so happy and excited. We want them, remember what the goal is? We want to take them out of that freeze response and we want them to move. So, meaning your voice was a source of safety, and them saying yes and no, we achieved the goal of the first step of having their body move. So basically, we kind of move them out of that rigidity and freeze that they're in. So moving the head, yes or no, and shaking. Now we can go to the next question. Okay. So the next question, when they are nodding or they told me that they can nod or shake their head, the next question I normally would say, it depends, but that question is very common. Are you feeling scared? Are you feeling a lot of fear? So now I'm validating that the rage that they had inside when they couldn't move and execute anything. This is a message you're telling your client that you understand how terrified they are in the States. And you want your client acknowledgement. You want them to know that you feel them. You feel all that, that fear they have. This is so important to validate what they don't understand and what's happening with them. It's validation. So you can use anything like after nodding their head and after, telling you yes or no, are you scared? Do you have you're feeling a lot of fear? And remember, keep your voice in that melody tone. Don't change, because you don't want them, that you just got them moving. You don't want them go back to shut down. So that's basically where now you can start doing other things with a child. You can start moving, you can start doing all kind of things. I want to add one more small technique for new patients, okay? For new patient that you're aware that they can, trauma patient that you're working with, and they can shut down. One of the things that I like to do when I bring them, would you touch, hold his hand, similar purpose? I won't touch and hold at the beginning. I would just wait for that permission that the child would give me. And permission will not going to be verbal. They can look at you after they freeze. They can probably smile. They can shy away. They kind of give you cues, and what I like to do to tell the child, can I touch your hand? A lot of times, a lot of kids laughed and smiled at me and they're like, okay, I'm not going to touch your hand. So ask permission. You can ask the child. We're talking about a child you don't know, because normally a child that they will immediately come out when they hear your voice that they're used to, and they will let you touch. But I would ask for permission, even if it's a child, you want to give them the sense of control of a decision that they can make. So if you have a child that's coming for the first time and you are bringing him to your office and you want to prevent something that could happen, shut down or freeze, not because of a traumatic event that could be triggered, is because their nervous system is very sensitive. So if they get scared, they will shut down. So use your office or the room you're working with as an anchor to ground them. So when you walk them into the room, just wait and tell them, look at the room. Can you see 4 things and name them for me? I used to, when in one of my training with children, abused children, we used to have different rooms, and each room has a color, one is Cinderella, one is like Pocahontas. And so when I walk in, I'm like, do you see what's in the wall? What's drawn? So what you kind of tell the child when you're asking them to look at 3 or 4 things to tell you about, you're making them familiar with the room. You're kind of showing them that the room is safe and they are scanning it themselves, not you are scanning. Because you never know when the child would walk in and they didn't see something in the room and they got startled or shut down. So anchor them by, let them look at the room. Oh, I see a cat. Oh, a cat. What's the color of it? What kind? Do you know her name? Go further. Not just recognize, go further. Let them be more and more familiar with the surrounding. Why? Because the child can use anything he likes to anchor himself or herself. They can anchor themselves if they're feeling stress. Oh, I know there's a cat that I liked so much, I'm going to look at it. Oh, that drawing, they start feeling anxious. That's automatic to see things that they're familiar, they like in the room, but you introduce that, especially for your new patients. And if you don't have anything interesting, please buy things that a child would like to look at, or pictures that will get their attention, because that's going to be helpful for them to regulate themselves if they're overwhelmed, to look at something they like that calms them down, that they love, that they're familiar with. So that's another step I wanted to add for you if you have a new patient coming in. My next question is, what if the child, you went, you spoke, you sang, you had all this melody and no response? What if the child, with everything that I talked about so far, all the techniques, it did not work, and the child is not nodding, did not tell you yes, did not tell you no, there's no moment is ready. So here's a further next step that you can use for the child. You can tell the child, because we still don't know if they are completely shut down or they're listening to something, you've been using your voice. But when you ask them if they can nod, yes or no, and they did not respond, ask them again and ask them again. But if there's no response, this is what I use, I normally say. Would you be willing to turn your eyes so you can see as far as the right as possible? Or would you be willing to turn your eyes all the way to the left? Why did I say all the way to the left or all the way to the right? I mean, you test it on yourself now. Try to look all the way to the right or try to look all the way to the left. Tell me what is happening. Can someone in the chat tell me what could be happening? Head movement, yes, Asma, excellent. Head movement, moving, yes. So you have to move the head sometimes, yes. So automatically, if I tell them all the way to the left, look, you see that? You see that slight move? That's a goal. They moved. So the nervous system is like you kind of pushing it. It's like a car, you know, when a car doesn't work and you have 2-3 people pushing it to work, you kind of taking a further step, telling them to look all the way to the right or all the way to the left, because automatically there you got that movement. And then you exactly, you tune, yes, eye fixation. Well, eye fixation, first they have to be in tune with your voice and then move your eyes or shake your head yes or no. Still don't try to touch or to get too close or face to face because it's threatening. I would like to play a video of exactly what I just said and described with a child that from Al Jazeera. So for copyrights, it's Al Jazeera, I published that. And I want to see how I can share my screen. And I will play the video twice. I want you to pay attention for the child reaction. I want you to pay attention for the doctor, what he was saying. I want you to pay attention to the end to kind of see if all the steps that we talked about, how really it applies in real life. And I'll play it again and make some comments about the video. Can you see the video?
No.
How
Yeah,
about now?
right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's play this video.
ايش يا عم؟ ايش صار معك يا عم؟ ايش صار؟ كنت نايم؟ ايش صار؟ ايش؟ يس كنت نايم؟ صار قصف؟ صار قصف عليكم وانتم نايمين؟ خايف الحين؟ خايف ليش خايف؟ خلص القصف الحين خلص يا عم خلص خلص انا معاك ماشي؟ خلص انت بطل لا مش تفعل بدك ابوك؟ الحين بدك خلاص
I mean, when I saw this child, I mean, I couldn't sleep for, like, I really couldn't sleep. But one thing that kind of put so much comfort, how the doctor handled the child. It could be instinctive, you know. There are probably other things I could have done and other things I would avoid to do. But in this case, because it's a child, I want to hear if you picked up on certain things here we talked about that you've seen now. Now remember, I couldn't sleep. I know it breaks the heart, but if you are facing this case like this doctor, melodic voice, yes, you need to know what you need to do. There's no one but you to help that kid. Melodic voice. So I like, first thing he said, انت كنت خايف, انت كنت نايم, with this. And if you notice, he's like, you were sleeping. And if you notice, he actually asked him a question, and the boy was not able to vocalize other than and that what explains that there's so much going on. The child was freezing at the beginning. By the way, he was freezing all the way until he cried. It was in the freeze. He was not able to vocalize. So see where I'm telling you that there's so much going on inside, but they cannot vocalize or talk. It was like, but there was something very subtle that tells me that he was listening. So when he was telling him, if you're sleeping, he was shaking his head. But he told him the question and fear, yes, about fear. He's like, كنت خايف? Were you scared? If you look how he nodded his head, كنت نايم, you're scared. He kind of said, yes, like, do you feel me? Do you really feel how scared I am? So the doctor was telling him if he was scared, and he was very much, the physician is overwhelmed. The physician canceled the overwhelmed visual and auditory. Yes, he took him. It's perfect. He took him on the side. That's excellent. And he made a connection. Remember when I said in the freeze response, to get you out of this is not to read books and watch movies or anything. You need to have connection with people. He made that connection, and he didn't make it quickly. He at the beginning talked to him, and then he carried him. The moment he made that connection, the kid cried. This is the moment when he got out of that freeze response, cried, and then his body start responding and shaking, and all of this is good. The only thing different I would do, I think the doctor here, nervous system, got overwhelmed, because I'm sure there's other hundreds of kids there that he wants to take care of, got overwhelmed, and told him, ما تبكيش, خلاص, don't cry, stop. I know we say that a lot in good intention, but the last thing you want to say to a child is crying, not to cry. However, he did something great. I'll give you candy. And you see the child is like, he stopped crying because he wants candy. I would say, cry, baby, cry as loud as you want. And I'm going to give you actually candy for crying, to bring that energy, to bring all that locked energy from inside. So just last thing, I want to play the movie again, and I want you to pay attention to when he said كنت خايف, and before that, when he said to him, where did you hear the bombs? Or, see when he kind of made him feel that I feel that you're scared, how much his head shook in agreement.
ايش يا عم؟ ايش صار معك يا عم؟ ايش صار؟
See, right now he's not responding. ايش صار? He's not there. But the doctor's voice is like, ايش يا عمو? ايش صار معك? ايش صار? He was very gentle.
كنت نايم؟
Okay, that's very much confirmation. كنت نايم. Oh, he got this.
ايش؟
Yes.
كنت نايم؟ صار قصف عليكم وانتم نايمين.
Now, when he told him there was bombing, he was sleeping. You see how much he nodded? Just a little bit, because he didn't see it. His body felt it and sensed it.
خايف الحين؟
Yes.
خلص القصف الحين. خلص يا عم. خلص.
That's very good. Look at his eyes. The moment he touched him, how they went down. He looked down, meaning he moved it from the overwhelming clues and cues, and having these eyes going down is like kind of tucking him in his body, and that was the greatest moment of connection And this is when his nervous system got regulated.
خافش خلص أنا معاك ماشي خلص فاهم أنت بطل
يا
فاهم.
حياتي.
هاي. بدك أبوك؟ الحين بدك
So here we see the power of connection, the power of your voice, the power of what to say, the power of all this work that we were talking about, what to do with your patient when your patient in that respond or in that stage. Any questions so far? So
I have a comment. As what Aisha said, there is a freezing response if the child is overwhelming from the sensory stimulation. We as an OT, we provide the child with a proper reception sensation, which is basically in the joint and muscles. So this is when we give a pressure to the child or we let them move and react. So I feel that it's similar here that we let them move, we give them proper reception stimulation, and that shut down or decrease the over responsiveness of the other sensations. So do you think?
The only thing that I am working with in this case is the step before you let them move. See, you want the child, if they got into that freeze response, not if the child is coming to you and you're working with them, before you touch them and let them move, is to give them the autonomy, the power, the control for themselves to do it first. So you that's the step right before you start working with them. If you see that your patient, like Aisha described that kid, in that freeze response, and then after that, like you see, he touched him, he kissed him, he hugged him. So after that, this is where your work starts. But what I'm saying, like if you did this prematurely, if you went to the child, picked him up and start working, you're basically working with their body that is not sending signals to the brain to heal. It's just like the phone is off and you're just playing with it and there's no signal. Yeah, you can do all of that, but there's no signal. So or you're working, but it didn't save. So that's where I want the child to have total power to get himself out for two reasons. First, you give them power. Second, you want them to learn how to do that by themselves. Practice. They will get to know themselves, their body, what they feel, and they can do it. Could it take more than a session to achieve the response? Actually, you can get a child out of this free response normally in the same session. But if there's severe trauma, I would say stay the whole session talking to the child and let the mom come again or the dad next day. I would say if the child stay in total freeze, I don't know how long is your session. For 30 minutes, you couldn't achieve anything. Maybe the melody of your voice in the next session will kick in, you know? So I would not touch them if they are in that response, start working. You can, but is that work doing any good for them? I don't know. I have no idea. Are you, when you're working, the child is, okay, they start responding, they start talking. Yes, they did. But you know, the part that I urge you to work with those children is to try to heal them emotionally as well, not just physically. So you want to do more than just physical help. You can be their own therapist. You can be their own healer for their nervous system. You can take that extra step to working with them further. It's about to regulate them. So to know what was the trigger is important to plan next step. Absolutely. And we do have that, how to know what the trigger is, a little bit further down. Now, let me talk about if the child is now we're going to talk about the opposite, hyperarousal. I know it's not the freeze response, but I kind of felt that I need to add it. So in case you're working with children, you have that. A moment where there was a lot, the child was playing, it was fine, and then there's a lot of hyper arousal, because now it's again hyper arousal because of a trigger. The child is triggered and we don't know what the trigger is. Again, we want to contain that hyper arousal and we don't want to know what triggered him for now. So according to Dr. Pat Ogden, and I specifically in your field, she has a book called Sensory Motor Psychotherapy. It's amazing to work with client in a sensory way, and it goes aligned with your kind of work. We might use our voice if the patient is dysregulated or they're hyper, to contain element that is not appropriate for the client to bring forward. You know, I'm not going to say things like, "Oh, you're so terrified." Yes, I will write all these names for you. Are you terrified? Are you scared? No, Dr. Pat. We're not gonna talk this way to the child who's hyper aroused, because the child who's hyper aroused, basically we want to ground them. We want to both ground both. We want to bring somebody out of that freeze, and we want to ground somebody who's going all over the place. So I may say something like, can you see me right now? شايفني حبيبي? Can you see me? Or I can say something like, can you feel your feet? Can you feel your feet? حاسس رجلك على الأرض, حاسس رجلك, and repeat it. Stay gentle, of course, but first, before you take the next step, let that child come out. Let them have that control, sense of control. Can you see me? Can you feel your feet on the ground? And he could say, like, you know, he can be like, so, and then, you know, he will start, and then he will look at you like, okay, stay with me. Stay right there. Stay with me. خليك معي. Okay? خليك معي. So your voice, you see how my tone, it's more of a matter of facts. I'm still gentle, I'm still kind to the child, but more of a matter of fact than the melody that I was doing to get the child out of the freeze response. So this is for the hyper-aroused kid. You actually want to go, you actually want to make that body language, you actually want to make that eye contact, you want to be close, don't touch, try not to touch until you feel the permission given. Just use your body. Can you see me? Use a lot of body language because they can see it. That's how you ground them, the children that are hyper aroused, the opposite, okay? We don't want to go with feelings. Later we would. You want to go more with sensories, you know, sensation. You know, they want to get them back into their body. So the first part, you want to get them out into the, from the stuckness. The other one, you want to bring them back into their body. That's why you say, can you feel your feet? إيديك حبيب, can you feel your hands? إذا ماسك إشي, ناس حاسس اللعبة. So be creative in a way to ground them. First thing you want to see if they see you, and make sure to ask them multiple times, use different questions to try in every way to get them in. So your voice still counts, but more of a kind of matter of fact kind of voice. And you're nonverbal because you're moving. See if they see you, if your feet, put your feet on the ground, start stomping and say, see, can you feel your feet? So they will see what you're doing and they will do it. And this is how you bring them in. Do what you want them to do in front of them. So this is how the nonverbal expression, they can see it. And then you can start, you know, working, going to the next step. Because, and again, I'm going to put this, the body, keep the score. According to Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, the body, I think this book is in Arabic too, keeps the score. This is like, I probably read that book 6 times, and every time I read it, I found something new and I learned something new. I don't know how you miss it, but this book, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk said, if you're only trained to use words and explanation, I don't see how you can get to your patient. Like, how are you going to get, if that's all what you're trained to do everything by explanation and talk? The part of the brain for word cognition, which I talked about earlier, it's your left, it's shut down, it's off. So it's like having your phone, internet is cut off, and you can make calls in and out. The phone is working, it's not broken, but there is disconnection between your body and your brain. So don't use a lot of verbal explanation, because that verbal explanation is just not gonna go in. It's just like when I give the same example, when you have your client and you give them news and you're talking, and they're just like not saying anything. Not because they necessarily understand everything you're saying. They may be shut down. They may be froze. They may be not everything you're saying. And how many times you are sitting, listening to somebody and things like coming from here, going where you're not processing anything. So, so really you need to become more of a somatic therapist. And that's the part you guys do, which is amazing, but you want to work more as well to be able to get to their body through your nonverbal, through your voice, through those cues that can help you activate that system that is shut down, whether it's the left, the language, or whether it's the right, the frozen part. So you need to learn about that. And those two books I recommended, they're like out of this world, how great they are, especially for your field. So basically what Dr. Bessel van der Kolk said, you want that body to be alive and to reinstate the signals between the body and the brain. So you can be singing, you can be breathing with them, you can make sounds. It depends. There was one autistic child that I used to work with. When he shut down in a meltdown, there was a song that he loved, and I know he loved. And the duck say quack, quack, quack. And all what I would say when he shut down, and the duck say quack, quack, quack. I would be saying that for 10 minutes until he will start like quack, quack, quack. I got him out. I got him out from either the hyperarousal or the shutdown he's in, because I know the child. So be creative, pay attention to what each patient like, because that can be your tool to help your child, the child to activate the nervous system or the left brain. So get them back alive, body and brain, get it back connected together. And you can go further by, you can stand up, you can move. It depends, you know your client better, but don't use cognition. Don't use things that they have to think about and to analyze so they can, it's not gonna work. So let's recap a little bit. Use to regulate the nervous system by communicating with your patient nervous system. So co-regulate from your nervous system to their nervous system. Focus on your voice, you know, the prosody, the rhythm, and avoid eye contact. That's in the freeze response. And third, practice right brain to right brain communication. Right brain to right brain, meaning I'm talking about nonverbal. I'm talking about the melody. I'm talking about, you know, not language. So kind of use what I've explained before. So generally more important for grounding, you know, the child or any age you're working with. Now the opposite in the arousal, stay away from empathy, because in that stage you want to ground them and be more matter of fact. And grounding, like stay right with me here. Can you feel your feet? Can you feel all of that in the ground? There was a very, very terrible BBC news put it, a mother lost her child, and she was in hyperarousal. She was running, and I'm going to play the video, but it's important. This is basically a session yesterday of a child free situation. It shows how moving him and touching him wasn't getting him out of the situation. Correct. Do you know what happened? What happened to him? Just hope is better now. Be a good observant. Yes. That's sympathetic response. Is it the parasympathetic? What is happening with animals? Sorry. No, yes, because we do have the same, they have the same nervous system. By the way, when I was talking now and speaking in that rhythm, my cat came out and she was sleeping. So she thought I'm calling her to, you know, cuddle with her. So she heard me from the other room. See that how I awakened her nervous system, and she came, she wanted to cuddle. So yes, it works with both. But I want to show a video that is heartbreaking. But again, that woman just received news that her son died, and she went into hyper arousal. And when she was, you know, screaming and running, she was doing this because she wanted to hold her child. She didn't get to hold her child. And then she was jumping and doing this because if you read her body language, she was trying to tell us she is hyper aroused because there are no words. She was screaming, I want to hug my child. I want to remove the rebels. I want to fight for my child. She was jumping up and down. I want to get my child. I want, to hold my child. And her body language explains it all. And her reaction, please pay good attention, because this is where you go to this woman while she's jumping. And I said, it was dangerous because she was going left and right. She didn't know where she's going. And she was a woman with a hijab and a khimar. She removed that from her face. So this is the thing when I said, to immediately try to ground them before they do something improper because they don't feel it. But you always want to be humane towards them. People were trying to cover her face. People were trying to do things because you don't know when you're hyper aroused what you're doing. She's probably expressing what she wished to do with her child. And we will talk a little bit more and see what would you have done if you are in that situation. I think you've seen that video.
إذا هذه الأم المتكلة التي فجعت باستشهاد ابنها في هذه الغارة بعد هذه الفاجعة، من يمكن أن يهون عليها ما حل بها؟ إذا
the reason I played this video is to let therapists, for example, or if you're working with a patient like that and you've seen what their need is basically, this is where I'm going to start therapy with. That woman needed to hug her child, and needed explanation. She was jumping. She needed explanation for what happened or how her son died, I'm assuming, because of her body language. I would literally start therapy by making sure that she's always having something, from that child, and, keep it with her. A lot of people would suggest different things, but her body did a move that she did not complete, because when you're in freeze, right before that, there was a movement that you wanted to complete and you couldn't. Therefore, you move in this way to complete what you needed to do. So your body and mind, kind of resonate what happened. So one important thing with hyperarousal clients like that, adult or children, is to immediately ground them by, where you are. We're in the hospital. Your son is shaheed. You say every single important thing and every single thing that to bring her back so she doesn't hurt herself without she knowing, because basically that's what mostly could happen in situation like that. We're going to talk a little bit now about triggers. Aisha, you brought that up, and how we would identify or let your patient identify triggers. Once you get your patient out of the freeze, whether it's a child or adult, I know you started working with them now. Okay, you finished the session, but you're going to see the child again. I would say spend some more time with the child, and you can kind of rewind the incident, and like, you remember قبل ما أغني تتذكر قبل ما أغني, you remember before I start singing to you? Do you know what happened before you freeze? Most of the time, what are they going to tell you if you ask them that question? If you literally ask them what happened, if we rewind what happened, what took over? Any thoughts? Whether is it verbal, videotaping these moments to show later, a good idea. No, it's not, because that actually will freak them out, because they will be like, who is this person? Did I do this? That will bring a lot of shame for the child. They will feel so embarrassed and a lot of shame. So the best way to get them out of the freeze is not only to get them out by your voice and everything we talked about, is to help them get out of it them too. And this is how I'm going to show you how to help them. They can do it themselves. So the next thing that we will do is when you ask them if they remember what happened, they will say, I don't know. And sometimes they could tell you, I don't understand. مش فاهمة عليك شو قصدك. Or he could say, ما بعرف. I don't know. See, for some people, it's a foreign idea that to ask them what happened with your nervous system. They're like, what? Normally you tell people, oh, how are you? كيفك? شو أخبارك? You know, that's the common things that we say. But we never ask them before in this kind of sense. إيش صار بجسمك؟ إيش حسيت قبل ما هيك تسكر على حالك? So they'll be like, إيش صار بجسمي? What happened in my body before? Like, I don't know. You want to be able to distinguish whether the child literally don't understand the question because they have never been asked. Nobody ever asked them, how do you feel in your body? Or is not aware of that the feeling is in the body. Normally when I have patients that been in therapy, they would know. They would tell me, oh yeah, before I shut down, I kind of felt something here, just couldn't breathe, or I felt tension here. Normally that kind of give me a feeling that this patient have been in therapy, talked to somebody, talked about how the feeling in the body, but most of the time others don't know that the feelings are in the body. So that's a foreign concept for them. So they only know, I feel sad, I feel happy, I feel afraid. When you go closer and said, where do you feel sad? Huh? Excuse me, what do you mean, where do you? When you feel sad, can you describe where is it in your body? It's very foreign. It's strange. But guess what? It is extremely crucial in your kind of work as occupational therapists to first educate the children about where they feel the feelings in their body. That's your cue. Where do you want to work with them? They could have a problem in a certain part of the body that you're working with, but underneath it, there's something else that the child can help you if you can communicate. In my office, I normally have a big photo of probably 20 faces. And under each face, there's a name: angry, anxious, scared, happy, disgust, like 20 different feelings. And I have one patient come in and like, how do you feel? I don't know. How are you today? I don't know, but that's extreme. So he used to go to that chart and put his hand and finger where he feels. Then I'd start teaching him what that feeling is. Easy for a client, was verbal. So that's why I put that expression post. I have it, expression post, because for nonverbal, they can point to how they feel. And it's so important to first, for nonverbal, to let them point how they feel, because that's how you teach them. If they don't know, you start teaching them. And then once they get the feeling, how they feel, then you kind of ask them, where is it in your body? Where do you feel it? So for example, I can learn when I get angry, what stage I'm in, 1, 2, 3, or 4, because I'm in tune with how I feel. You need to be very much in tune and to recognize where is your feeling in your body. First, in my anger, I feel a flush of heat all over me inside, as if you gave me like a hot shower all over me. That's number 1. Then it kind of go and concentrate on my chest. Then it concentrate here. Then it's in my head. So when it's in my head, my anger, I immediately tell people around me, I need to be alone. When I have that flush and I'm outside, I can contain myself. I know how to navigate. So I have 4 stages that I discovered about my anger. So not only you need to understand where your feelings is, there are stages of it. You need to recognize it, to know what to do, to have control over what's happening inside you, and it doesn't reflect outside. Same thing with the children. So keep that. Aisha, I will send you that poster I have. They have it, I think, on Google Images. It's an excellent poster you can share with the group, that you can print it out and put it in your office. You can remove the English words, put it in Arabic, and don't underestimate it. The child does not understand, keep saying it. They will recognize the word with the facial expression, then they will learn to tell you. And then when they learn to tell you, they can learn to describe it in their body. So find the feeling in their body later. It's extremely important. Now, this is basically what I wanted to talk about triggers, is to take them back. And then after you take them back, you kind of teach them where that feeling is and how does it feel, and kind of expand in the frame of feelings more than happy, angry, scared, or sad. Do you think their cognition won't be loaded? No, actually, this is basically you're putting a puzzle. You're kind of putting a puzzle. Actually, a child that have a feeling and does not have words for it is so overwhelming. When you show a child and he recognizes that facial part in him, you are helping him put words, language, meaning to what he feels. So at the beginning, he may look at him like, I don't know what's this. But you can point if he's angry, and you can say, are you angry? And you can point to that angry. You gave him language, you gave him meaning, you gave him words that you never know if he'll use it, if he later use it or not. But that's another sense of control you're giving the child to understand what's happening with himself. And you don't have to be mindfulness. You just talk to them or show them pictures, especially nonverbal pictures. I use picture all over when I work with nonverbals. So a picture of the feeling, let them find it in their body and work with that. That will help you later in therapy. Let's quickly wrap the 4-step process that can help patients regulate their freeze. Previous exercise that we said, we rewind the narrative. We rewind it. You don't care a lot about the story. You don't want to go back with the child to tell you the story. The memory until that point of the trauma is not what we're looking for. Rewind, rewind the narrative. We want to rewind the narrative and take them out of the memory, what happened, put them in right before they freeze. What were they feeling? It could not come that easy, but you can go further. Okay, what was the last thing you did that you remember? I was كنت بلعب. I was playing, or I was doing anything. Okay, good. Is that the last thing you did? Yes. And then what do you remember after that? I remember that, I don't know, I just did this. I don't remember anything after that. When the patient tells you that I did this, that is an unfinished action. That's where the freeze is. Unfinished action, something horrific, something terrible, something scary happened that he froze before doing something else, which is either run or. So you can help your patient if you can get to that point where the patient remember what he did the last thing, and then you move him in what he remember where he froze, and then you ask him, what would you wish you would have done here? They will laugh. Normally I get hysterical laugh. This is silly. Come on, sit with me. What? Like, you're here. What would you wish you would have done? Well, I feel like and then they will come with silly things. Nothing is silly. I feel like I wanted to punch the wall or punch the side. I actually punch you in the face. They would say that. I said, okay, let's try that. But don't punch me in the face. Now I'll bring a pillow and I let them complete that move. So if you're able to understand the moment your patient froze and ask them a question, what would they have liked? Ask them, yes, the next, what would have action you wanted to take? And then let them practice it. The results is not something you can see. The result is something they would feel. They will share with you how they feel. Practice it in the moment with you. And how they practice, let them figure out what is it that they want to complete that action. So let them do something and then just wait and see how it unfolds, and the patient can start tasting that beautiful feeling of finishing that action. Over and over every time with your patient, if you do, because remember, there's many traumatic events, so many, but there's only one body. So it's easier to work with one body than work with a narrative of many traumatic events. This way, if you're able to connect with your patient and be able to have them complete that action, the change for your patient is unbelievable, because they will once they understand and they complete that action that they wish they take, they no longer can face that freeze response. So this is basically a way of healing and getting them out of this freeze response from that somatic movement and getting them back. So as subtle and as simple it may sound, it's a life-changing for your patient. You can do that. You can add that. So let's recap quickly the 4-step. First, we want to go back to the moment that the patient sensed danger. So it's easier to say, تتذكر إمتى أنت كنت خايف? When did you sense danger? أول ما سمعت البيت بنهز. When I saw the house was moving. إيش آخر إشي سويته? What was إيش آخر إشي عملته? So remember, we don't want to talk about the house that is moving. What was the last thing that you were doing? أنا كنت بنط. I was jumping. Okay, that's good. You were jumping. So we're looking to help them discover the action of their body that they wanted to complete and they couldn't. Third, so إيش صار بعدين؟ اللي ما بعرف. I just went like this. I don't know. I just did this. What was it that you wanted to do? I wanted to jump more. I wanted to get out of the house. Okay, do you want to run? Let's get out, me and you. And I could be running over and over and over and over because that's what the child wanted and he couldn't. That's your job. As easy as it is sound, it's not easy. The results that can come for that child, that's just give them a new experience, a new body feeling. That will make your life so easy in working with that patient. And you will notice that your work that took probably before you do that 1 month, it may cut to 1 week. If you see the child, I don't know how many times you see the child, but it will cut down and you'll see progress happening quickly because first of all, they have a new experience with their body, new understanding, new autonomy, new self-control, and everything that did not understand, they start, getting in, and you will hear them. They will tell you exactly what they, what they feel. Now, some other ways with the children, and it's something somebody just mentioned about the in a freeze response. If you know the child very well, and you know that one of the things is pressure. Now that remember, if you know the child and you know that pressure is a good way, please, hold their hand, and I ask permission always because I know they like pressure, because when I was talking to them, they told me I had a weighted blanket. I believe probably use that with children, the blanket that is heavy with children, especially with children with sensory problem. They like a heavy blanket. I could hold their hands. I can hold like this, until, they feel better if they are in any situation of a freeze. But again, remember, putting pressure is only permissible when you know that you can do it and you know that the child does it and is okay. And in some cases, we have here in the United States with children with special need, psychiatric dogs or service dogs that are trained very well on the nervous system. When they feel the child nervous system is shut down, they go and they sit on the child's chest to put weight on the child. I mean, those dogs are like incredible. They're trained to pick up on what the sick child feel and immediately apply it. And your cat, if you have a great relationship with your cat, or your child who has special need, bring a cat, because the cat can sense that too. And they can literally sit on your chest, sit on your hand, on your legs to put that pressure. I'm just giving you extra example, extra help for things when you're not there, to give tips for the parents, whether it's the weighted blanket, vest, their clothes, they're heavy, they can use animals, that. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was beneficial, and I hope that, you took something away, and I'm open for any questions or anything. And I hope you use that in the future and probably email me, tell me how did it go. Is there any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Oraib. It was a very informative lecture, and I really enjoy it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here, and I enjoyed talking to all of you. And any questions, I'll put my email here in the chat. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. And if you have any other area that you need to understand further from the psychological perspective with trauma, I'll be more than happy to give another quick workshop.
I
يعطيك
can see in
العافية.
class many thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you
يعطيك
all.
العافية دكتورة عريب، صحيح يعني وقت ممتع جدا.
الله يعطيكي ألف عافية. Thank you so
شكرا
much.
كثير.
شكرا.
بنستنى الريسورسز اللي قلتي بدك تبعتيهم، إذا في كمان أسماء كتب أو
أنا رح
البوستر.
أبعت لك. Yes, رح أبعت لك كل شيء. Please share it with everyone. Like every single thing that I talked about, from Bessel van Gogh, Pat Ogden, Janina Fisher. Those are all sensory psychotherapy that are so helpful in your profession. Also, the posters that I use in my office as well.
أوكي والله.